Claire, I know in Notes from the Burning Age, there's a lot of, since it is farther in the future, there is a lot of different perception of like the resources that came before, the things that existed and are sort of being repurposed or sort of tweaked in order to fit the current narrative in that book. So how does that, as well as your perspective on climate change, fit into the works that you write, and Notes from the Burning Age in particular?
You can totally cut this, but I might just be a terrible author and slightly skew and not talk about my own book for a second, because so many interesting things have come up, and I'm aware that it's not necessarily a hugely long podcast. Deep breath in case you want to cut that. There's so many things that have just been said by everyone. I just want to ask questions of other people just for a second, if that's okay. And then I'll totally pitch my own book. But all of us have talked about writing from a place of anxiety. And if we've learned anything in the last 2 years of COVID and plague, as well as climate change, it's that being creative while anxious is unbelievably hard. It's much easier to create when not stressed out of your mind. And so in many ways, what I think is interesting about everything we're doing as writers and everything that the kind of Cli-Fi movement is doing, if you can call it a movement, is trying to channel anxiety into something good. And that seems to be a phenomenally difficult creative task. And it's not necessarily the same as even finding optimism. There seems to be, in literature particularly, literature loves a hero story, essentially. And with climate change, one of the problems we have is there are not many heroes. There's Greta Thunberg, there's David Attenborough. David Attenborough will be dead soon, though it breaks my heart to say it, because he's 5,000 years old, and Greta Thunberg is still a teenager, and we can't put it on her. And literature loves a hero, and we love a hero who solves it. So from my point of view as a writer, there's this massively difficult creative problem of how do you tell stories about climate change while writing from a place of anxiety, while not playing down the truth of it, because the truth is important, but while also creating something optimistic, but also while acknowledging that stories love a hero, and climate change stories do not necessarily have one hero, they have a movement, and that creates a massive, massive challenge from a writing point of view. And I just kind of wondered, because I feel like everyone has touched on something like this, how everyone in this podcast deals with approaching anxiety and realism as you write, and how you've actually stayed sane doing that. Because the only way I stay sane is by writing. If I write stories that I feel are empowering to humans, then I can feel slightly heroic a little bit in my own way and feel like I'm doing my part, even though I know I'm just one of millions and millions and millions of people trying to create this narrative. The complexity and the challenge of being creative and being honest with that, and hopefully inspiring people with that instead of just scaring people, seems like a monumental task for literature as a whole to solve.
Who wants to jump in there?
This question mark.
I can
go for it, Sam.
I can try. Someone once said that the spoiler alert to all my stuff is collective action is the superpower. And so often, while I acknowledge and agree that conventional narratives love heroes and telling the story of the person who makes the difference is how we are accustomed to seeing that. But often what I'm trying to do is show that collectives have power, that communities have power, and that where there's space for heroism is often in that ability to bring people together. And so telling stories that are converging, many people coming together to form a community and take action, or people whose strength lies not in lone, brave acts of sacrifice or unrelatable heroism.
Say goodbye to rugged individualism.
Yeah. You can be rugged all you want, but you're part of a community whether you like it or not, and you are shaped by your people, your history, the nation, the world, karma, whatever. So that's my sort of antidote to that, or my sort of attempt to take that tendency and turn that into something that will leave people feeling that they have the power to make change, but also that we are few of us will be faced in our lifetimes with the moment that characters are presented with all the time of like, will you make the right decision to like shut down the evil computer that's going to destroy the world, or will you expose the injustice that you've uncovered, right? That doesn't really happen, right? But what does happen every day is like, will you choose to do something to make a difference, even if it's small, even if it's inconvenient? And so that's how I want to sort of take that sort of at least Western, I don't want to say universal, but that very common approach to storytelling that we're familiar with, of like, the rugged hero solving all the problems and saying like, no, it's about community, it's about people coming together. That's how change happens in real life. That's how things have changed, right? People talk about technology solving problems, but in the absence of like a justice movement, technology will only reinforce existing divisions and problems.
And positivity plays a huge part in all of this, connectivity and positivity, bringing people together to work towards some kind of solution, And Matt, you recently wrote a blog post on Hope Punk, sort of just as a title, but also briefly talking about the movement itself. From your perspective, what role do more optimistic or positive genres have in the future of climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I this is a good question, because it actually also segues with what Claire asked. So, I think that I would never put the responsibility of like solving climate change on literature. I mean, that's just like a huge responsibility. But I think that in art in general, what we can do is provide inspiration and alternate narratives that provide people a sense that a different future is possible. So, it's like that Bradbury story, All Summers in a Day, right? Where it's like raining every single day, and then that one day of sunshine, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know this was possible. I think that a lot of our visions of the future are dark and bleak. And if we provide an alternative vision of the future, even if it's just something small, it doesn't have to be like, the hero's journey that solves the problem for the whole globe, but just something small, enough to inspire someone to say, oh yeah, that's possible. This is what we could do and we're not doing. I think that's incredibly important. Whether or not Hope Punk as a genre description is accurate or is a good term, I mean, I don't know. I often find that when you're talking about genre distinctions, it's splitting hairs, and honestly, I don't have that much interest in calling something this or that. I mean, I leave that up to like, historians and librarians. But I do think that there's always a story, right? There's always a story, and finding that story that gives people that little bit of ray of sunshine, right? That maybe something better is possible. I think that is a beautiful thing that art can do.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm curious, I'll put this out to everybody, where you feel, well, speaking of genre classifications and all that crap, where something like young adult fiction might fit into this in terms of sort of bridging a gap between our generation and the generation that's coming after us, and how these stories that are more geared towards teenagers and young adults might be sort of like the motivators or the spark that ignites their passion in these things. If anyone wants to jump in on that.
Well, all I will say is this, and because I'll let others speak at this, but I feel like when you're a young reader, you're a lot less critical of stuff and a lot less judgmental. So I think that it's a way to kind of reach people before they get cynical, and get just now if you had something that was like, look, the future's beautiful, and we're stopped using oil, and everything's solar power, and it's post scarcity. No one's going hungry, and no one's homeless. And someone's like, "Oh, what is this saccharine junk?" And people is cynical and won't read it. But like a young reader might be like, "Oh, wow, this is really cool." But, and then when they get into their 20s, or maybe they go into college and they decide what to major in, they're going to be like, "Oh no, I want that future that I read about," right? Because I grew up watching like Star Trek Next Generation. I want my post scarcity future. I want like a future where I can, like, everyone, you're hungry, you go to your replicator and you print out, you replicate your dinner and you get everyone's clothed and things like that. So if we can inspire kids that way before they grow up into cynical adults, I think that's good.